The Hayu could not remain at berth on the Lummi Island side overnight due to low tides throughout the year, and that creates some substantial issues for us related to that. At this time, the Hayu requires a 5-member crew to the Chief's 3, and unless and when a successful congressional bid for reclassifications were made that we have no reason to believe would be easy, the Hayu would take an additional $600,000 to $700,000 a year to run. The Hayu is the same vintage as the Chief, demanding its own dry docking and maintenance investments, and one or the other vessels will need mooring contract for 365 days a year. The total cost of the changes is estimated at more than $7 million to make the Hayu permanently work for us. For these reasons, I just can't support taking a action that is interim to our long-term goal of building and providing a new ferry as a replacement for the Chief. Therefore, our recommendation in a couple of weeks to the council is going to be is that, hey, this was a good opportunity for us to look closely into this. I appreciate the citizens who were involved and that brought this forward to us, but I do not intend to place a bid on the Hayu at this time. Now, other considerations offered by the proponents of adding a second ship, including interoperating agreements with other counties, are good ideas, and I have asked that the staff continue to pursue them further. There are other ships, the Trek is one, and other relationships with Skagit and Pierce County that may cost-effectively raise the level of service during dry dock and outages. I'm not against pursuing those options. Then they're not off the table, and as we move forward into the future, we work with the Lummi Nation in regards to the Tiger Grant funding for the new ferry. We're going to continue to assess the options as we move forward. So that's the statement that I'd like to make on the Hayu. Again, I do really appreciate the people that have brought this forward for consideration. That I did an initial analysis of it about 3 or 4 months ago in my office and went through the beam and the draft and the width and the weight and all of those things, and it didn't seem to check out with me at that particular time. But then we had the presentation, and like I say, as we spent about $8,000 with consultants, and those documents will be available for review.
Has anyone from Whatcom County gone to inspect the Hayu?
Yes.
Certainly.
Have you read the citizens' report on the Hayu?
I have seen the citizen. Have I read every word of it? No. I saw the presentation on it and responded to the major issues that were involved in it, and that's one of the reasons why we spent the money to get third-party consultants involved that had the technical expertise to really analyze the situation. I'm comfortable that that I know enough about what was presented and what we have done to analyze the situation to the point that I'm not comfortable in pursuing it.
Thank you. What problems you think could arise with the Lummi Nation in docking at Gooseberry Point in the short or long term if the county acquires a different vessel that is, say, twice as long and much wider than the Whatcom Chief?
Well, I think one of the main concerns that we have is that our current tideland leases are designed for the Whatcom Chief, and if we go to a longer, wider ferry, we need to open all of that up, and once we open those leases up, we've created another situation that may be contentious to resolve. Now, I believe we've got a good relationship with the Lummi Nation. I have lunch with Chairman Louws once a month. I've met Richard Jefferson 2 or 3 times in my office, and I think that what we have going on is very productive at this particular time. But they have their goals as a tribal nation, and we have our goals to maintain, and it's a very professional relationship, and I think we need to be very cautious as we move forward that we don't lose the lease that we have at this particular time and the next 28 to 30 years of peaceful passage between Gooseberry Point and Lummi. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I see on that. And secondly is that I think that the HIU is a step to the side. It's not a step to the future. And my goal as county executive is to solve problems for the long term. We've been talking about a new ferry for the Lummi Island for Lummi Island for quite a few years, and I want to focus on that and be able to present a solution to that. So, thank you.
I think you. What steps can the county take now to help float a bond for a new ferry and related docking facilities?
Well, I think we have what is probably our best opportunity right now with the federal Tiger grants to be able to put a bond measure forward in front of our need for a new jail and in front of the need that we have to provide secure funding for emergency medical services, basically our paramedics, I don't believe is going to happen, and I wouldn't be recommending that. But I think there is a time in the future when that queues up to be the possibly the appropriate action if federal funding doesn't become available.
What do you think of the idea of keeping ferry fares as they are and use the extra money to save for a down payment for a new ferry in 10 or 20 years when we have to replace
That
them?
would be nice if the Lummi Islanders were all willing to pay for the new ferry. Raise of hands. On a serious note with that one though, the money that we save today to buy something that we're going to do 20 years down the road is, from a financial perspective, is nice. But I go back and look at construction costs since 2000 to 2015 have probably gone up about 80 to 85%. And having money in the bank that you use from 2000 to now is you know, just even compounding what it is substantially lower than that. So you continue to lose the value of the dollars you're saving today. So although it would be nice to do, I think that the consensus is that the ferry replacement needs to come from a different fund than what we're using on the operations side. And I think that for now it would be best to just keep our rates in line with where we have going on, bouncing them back up and down, and dealing with the ferry issue either through a bond or some type of a levy when the time appropriate.
Thanks. What steps are required to pay for a new
It can
ferry?
be dealt with in a lot of different ways. The steps that I would like to make necessary is to achieve the memorandum of understanding with the Lummi Nation, receive probably phase 1 of the Tiger grant for a few $1 million that would give us the ability to rebuild and build a new terminal at both sides and to provide for a new ferry. And then after that, it would be the Lummi Nation then would go through phase 2 of the Tiger grant for the actual construction of their marina. But they know that we have to move before they can build it. So we both want to work together on permitting issues and work cooperatively on that. That's one way that it could get paid for. The other way is use the general taxing authority of the citizens of Whatcom County to buy one through councilmatic bonds or through voter-approved bonds. There's 2 different ways to do it there. You know, or the real draconian one, and don't get me wrong here, I'm not promoting that, but to raise fares up and have the Islanders pay for it. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways that it can get paid for. It just needs to come to the forefront and become the most important issue before us to get it taken care of. But I'm excited about the opportunity that we have working with the federal government and working with the Lummi Nation. I think that it's some real breakthroughs that we have right now, and we need to pursue that particular option as far as we possibly can, and hopefully to completion to be able to make that happen.
Thanks. I love the passenger-only service and would much prefer a passenger-only ferry with occasional monthly vehicle service rather than a new expensive ferry proposition. Is this or can this be a part of the consideration as changes are contemplated in the future?
You know, ultimately, I think that through the last lease negotiations, that was probably didn't come to the forefront of ideas, but it probably was contemplated at least by a few people of like, hey, what's this going to be down into the future, and how are we going to provide this service, and what are we going to do with it? Right now, I'm committed to provide the level of service that the citizens of the island have been accustomed to for the last decades, and that's a decision that I'm not going to make or I'm not going to pursue unless it becomes absolutely necessary, and I don't believe that we're at that point right now, or unless I see a groundswell of citizens come forward from the island.
Can the 1.5 million emergency fund or whatever it is be reduced to say 1.2 million with the other 300,000 annually going into a capital improvement fund that would help fund a bond for?
Yes, it could. I think I've answered that question reasonably well already. I don't. Without recommendations from LIFAC and again a group of people that would be very supportive of that, I'm not advocating right now to make any wholesale changes to the service that we're providing. I think that we've ran peaceably here for the last 2.5 to 3 years, and what I would like to make is small adjustments to what we have going on so that for the next few years we can continue to do that as we pursue the long-term vision of finding a long-term replacement for the chief.
Does the contract with the Lummi Nation restrict the size of the new ferry? It needs to be larger. Does the county have any say in the dock location and safety?
I think that we have an opportunity to, through the environmental impact statements that we're going to need and needs assessments related to this, is to determine what our need is going to be for the ferry and for the terminals. And in exchange for moving our existing terminal and spending many millions of dollars more than what we would be required to under our existing lease, I think that we have a reasonable opportunity to negotiate in good faith with the nation so that we can possibly get a right-sized ferry and get a title lease that goes more into perpetuity than the one we have right now. And those are some of the absolutes that I have with it. Right now, under the current lease, we only have the legal responsibility to change the dolphins at the outside edge of the existing terminal. And what they're proposing would be for us to have to pretty much rebuild that existing terminal and change the parking area. That's what they would like to achieve. And like I said, is that, hey, if we can make this benefit Whatcom County and make this benefit the Lummi Nation, I'm all absolutely for it. But I don't want to be put into a position that we're going to spend more money than what our lease requires us to spend, because we're spending $6 million of transportation funds for Lummi Nation projects, plus I don't know, $200 and some thousand a year for the lease, and we have 30 years left on it, and we aren't going to give that up in exchange without something of like value. And I want to work productively towards that. I don't want to hold anything up just because, but obviously, being a businessman, there has to be a value exchange on this, and I think that we can make that value exchange happen, and both of us be winners. And that's another key concept in business is there isn't really winners and losers. You try to make winners and winners in everything that you do, and that's my goal in this, is to make it so that they're pleased with the end result and that we're pleased with the end result.
Thank you. A new ferry will take 3 to 5 years if we start today. What are your plans if the Whatcom chief either fails or has its capacity severely restricted by the Coast Guard as it is not in compliance with Coast Guard capacity and safety?
Well, I believe that the ferry right now is well maintained. We've got a good relationship with the Coast Guard. I can't predict all of the what ifs that may potentially come forward. Obviously, if something major happened at that particular time, we'd react as quickly as we possibly could. As we said, the trek is maybe a viable option out there for
long-term lease for us to operate or to buy, and we're also working with Pierce and Skagit counties, so I think that there are opportunities out there that we can react to. Would it impact the Islanders? Yes. But you know, that risk has been there. That the same question that you've just given, that's a risk that we've lived with for a lot of years. And I think that we have viable plans for moving forward, and if we can put some legs underneath them, it'll work out well for us over the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Are you aware that outside of the Hayou, there is no available ferry to come to our aid if the chief goes down? What are the county's backup plans?
Well, we have the backup plans, and we have under contract the passenger ferry. And as I've mentioned numbers of times tonight, I know that the truck is out there. I don't know as much about it at this particular time, but if we would get into a position, as I'm sure that we would have any time over the last, how many years is 35, 45, 50 years that we've owned the Whatcom Chief, that if something serious happened, we'd search far and wide and try to make as the best decision we could based on the circumstances of the day.
The island community is no longer diverse because the cost of the ferry has forced working families to leave the island. Will the cost of the ferry terminal and new ferry be affordable for working families and young people choosing to be residents of the island?
You know, that really ends up being a practical and a political discussion. Ultimately, as right now, I think the Islanders, we've got a 60-40 cost distribution, or 55-45 or something like that, on the operations side of it, and Whatcom County government takes care of pretty much 100% of the terminals through the road budget. And you know, the lifestyle that is afforded out here is probably always going to be a bit more expensive than it is living on the mainland. I think that if you look at ferry services throughout the state and throughout our nation, if you choose to live on an island, it's going to be a bit more expensive. With that expense comes what I look outside is a pretty sweet lifestyle. And we're gonna continue to strive to find the sweet spot as we move forward as a community, as a greater community of Whatcom County. I can't really answer that in a direct fashion, other than I think that the leaders in past years have done a pretty good job of trying to find that balance, and I can't assume anything different moving down the road. It's one of the reasons that I don't really want to try to rework everything that's happening at this particular time as it relates to the distribution of funds and the fair issues and all of that. I think that we're doing reasonably well right now, and I would assume into the reasonable future we're going to try to do the same.
The estimated costs of the $7 million to reconfigure the docks for the Hayou is still less than the $12 million cost of an emergency ferry. Why would the county not be interested in a backup ferry even after a new ferry is built?
You know, you have two ferries, and you pretty much double your maintenance costs. You've got double the engines, you've got double the hulls that need paint, you've got double the certifications that need. We've worked productively for 50 years with one ferry and have made do with passenger service back and forth, and that would be nice. But in terms of all of the things that we deal with in Whatcom County, having two ferries at this particular time just doesn't seem to be a viable opportunity for us. I don't want to spend $7 million to put docks in for the secondary ferry, and then 3 years after that get a Tiger grant and then have to pull the whole works out and redo it one more time. And also, we're buying a ferry. The secondary ferry is only 4 years newer or 5 years newer than what the one we have right now. So it's a step sideways instead of a step forward. I'm committed to making the step forward and bypassing the step sideways.